Hey everybody, Steve Burns here. So now it's time to pull it all together. We're going to bring your 3D objects into a photographic environment. And this is an actual shot of one of my, small little workspace area in my office. And we're going to place the 3D objects so they actually look like they belong in the scene. So this is really what I want you to do for your homework assignment. In addition to building at least a minimum of 5 3D objects, I want you to texture them. I want them to be lit properly, and I want them to appear as if they're sitting right on your desktop space or some sort of an environment space from your home or your workspace, okay? So I'll give you a little bit of creative license, but again, keep composition in mind, and think about where things, how they're going to lay down on your desk space, or up, leaning up against a wall, however you're going to place them. It has to look like it belongs there. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into it and bring in some 3D objects. So I'm going to start with this 3D bottle here. So it's one I quickly rendered, and I based the 3D bottle. Let's go over to my layers and turn it off temporarily. Based it off of this shape, okay? And again, when you're going to make a 3D object, you're always going to use a reference, and I can't say that enough. So I was able to match it pretty close to what I have here. In addition, the 3D bottle is made up of both the lid and the bottle itself. If I turn the lid off, there's the bottle top, or the top portion, and then if I turn the bottle off, okay, so we have two separate 3D objects here. They're merged together in a single group. So when you build all of your 3D objects, at least your 5 minimum 3D objects, you're going to merge it into a single 3D scene. Then you're going to place that 3D scene on a layer on top of your photographic image, okay? And then from there, we're going to modify it even more. All right, so let's go ahead and go to my 3D layer, and I'm going to hit the F key so I can see them side by side. In fact, let's go to my Windows Arrange. Let's go ahead and tile this vertically, and I'm going to just grab this and place it inside the scene. And sit and relax. Go ahead, hit the F key so I can maximize the screen with this image, and we're just going to focus here. I'm going to bring in something else. I want to bring in the magnifying glass next. So go back to my Windows, Arrange, Tile Vertically. I don't need this one anymore. I'm going to go ahead and close it out, which is our bottle 3D object. And I have a layer that is should be, there we are. Let's target the right object. And there is my magnifying glass. I'm going to click and hold on that layer, and I'm going to drag it on over. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to work with 2 objects. However, you guys are going to be working with a minimum of 5 objects to merge into a single 3D scene. Okay, so I'm going to keep this simple, and I'm going to close this out here. I don't need it anymore for the time being. And let's work with this one file. All right, the first thing we're going to do is merge the 3D objects together. So whether in this case it's going to be 2, in your case it's going to be 5 or more. So target both layers, and it will be nice if I can right click on here and merge those 3D layers, but we can't. Adobe hasn't given it to us. So we're going to go to our 3D menu, merge 3D layers, and give it a few moments, and it's all merged together in one, as you can see. Now, I'm going to go to my 3D panel. This is where I'm going to be working with mostly. There's my merged 3D objects, magnifying glass, and this one over here is the actual bottle. So I'm going to double click this one, and I'm going to call it bottle because that consists of both the bottle and lid. In fact, I'm going to type in there bottle and lid. And of course our magnifying glass, so it's right below here. So Photoshop's 3D engine kind of disorganizes this stuff a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our 3D panel, and we're going to group those together into a single scene, and it's going to give us a much more organized workflow. So now everything's inside its scene, and I'm going to just call this one 3D objects, and There we go. So if I go to that group and turn it off, off and on, or turn it back on. All right. Now, at this point, what you want to do is kind of match that focal plane or the, and as well as the surface. So in other words, I'm going to go to my camera view and I want to match the field of view, okay, which is basically the focal length of your lens. So with that targeted, I'm going to pull this up a little more here. Target the camera. On the properties panel, instead of the coordinate view, target the camera view. So what would help me here is I'm going to match that particular scene. I could bring in this background, bring this into a background, into a 3D background. In fact, let's actually explore this. So if I come over here to the environment tab and we bring in the Wacom tablet image as a background. So go to the very bottom, go to the background, load a texture, and let's go to my textures images. Right, so we're in environment. I'm gonna go back down here again to the background, load a texture. There's my desktop, target it, click OK. Let's see what it looks like. And so that you get an idea of the difference between the two workflows. Okay, so we're in environment, go to the camera view. Now I'm going to move the camera around, and in fact, let's go to my layers and turn these all off from the bottom. Okay, so now we have my desktop environment in the background. Target the 3D. Now these other two are turned off, okay, so there's nothing underneath it but a transparent area. And if I go to my camera view, I can move my ground plane around, and that desktop is always going to stay back there in the back scene. So the idea here is that I want that plane to simulate as close as I can to the surface of that desktop. Now my current view, under the current view, I'm going to go down here. It's a 49 millimeter. It's more of a 50 millimeter lens. Now I shot this with my cell phone. As we all know, cell phones are pretty wide angle lenses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this probably closer, not that wide, but maybe something to something like a 25. Let's do like a 25 millimeter. So select it, 2.5. Okay, that works a little better. That starts to appear as if it's actually part of this photographic scene. So that's the very first thing that you do is you place in your backdrop, and your backdrop, should match the size of your scene. So since I opened this originally, or dropped these 3D objects into the backdrop file, by bringing this backdrop in as a JPEG into the 3D file, it matches your entire scene. All right, so let's keep that in mind. All right, go to the camera view so we can move the camera around. I'm going to pull it down, and I'm going to get it to match with the table. I'm going to go to my rotation command, and I'm going to start to rotate it a little bit. Now I need to pull it away from the camera. All right, I'm pulling it away from the camera. Now I may be a little bit too wide. Maybe we'll go to something like 30 millimeter. Okay, that might be a little more appropriate. All right, so it is thinking. I'm gonna go to my slide command. There we are. That starts to look a little more. You have to play with this, okay? Because you're guessing as to what your focal length is a lot of times in these particular cameras. And I can kind of rotate it. I can, as long as I match the angle of that desktop as much as possible, that's going to help. And something else is going to help. Let me kind of bring this down a little bit more so you can see. Look at that. Okay, I'm going to pull this up So you see the shadow, how the shadow is falling. It's given appearance as falling on the desk when in actuality it's falling on the ground plane. Let's go ahead and modify the lights. Now this will help you. Modify the light so that it gives you a much more accurate idea as to how things are going to be falling on your desktop. All right, so the light source in this photographic scene is actually coming from this angle. So I'm going to look at how shadows are falling on the rest of everything else. So it's falling at this angle, and the shadow is falling from this monitor to the right and right down here in the bottom. The same thing is happening here, probably more like this and more like this. All right, I'm going to rotate on the Z-axis and kind of play around with this. And I'm going to access the camera view, and I'm going to just fake this so it looks like everything's falling appropriately. All right, go to the slide command. Let's see if I pull it in a little more. Okay, that looks like it might work. All right, so in our 3D panel, I'm gonna go to the bottle and lid. I'm going to pull those out a little bit. So I'm not liking too much of how the 3D environment is treating the camera view. So I may have to go back to a 49mm lens. That may be my best bet, but it was worth experimenting with. So I'll go over here to the camera. We can go to 50 if you like. Okay, and let it finish up there. Then I'm going to go and slide this back again in my camera view. It's looking pretty good. There we are. And I'm going to adjust this so kind of fake it to make it look like it's actually going to be sitting on that desk. So I'm going to rotate a little more, go to bring it up a little bit so shadow's going to be just right. Now, from this point, we're going to modify our objects. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to the bottle and lid, and we're going to maximize that just a little bit. So, bottle and lid. Take it, resize, make it a little bit larger, rotate it up. I'm just using my rotation tools up here. And as you can see, the widget here is also a little bit off, and it has a lot to do with how it's grouped. So if I go to the bottle, and there's no way to really reset that. That will be a nice feature inside of 3D and Photoshop where we can reset this, but use your tools, go to my move tool, move it straight on up. I can do this manually, and if I need to set it on the ground, remember 3D, move objects to ground. Okay, and it's there. I'm gonna go over here to my rotation on the Z-axis, place it right about there. Now let's go over to our magnifying glass, target the magnifying glass. Let's rotate it as well. I'm going to make it look like it's actually sitting on the ground. In fact, let's lean it up against something. Maybe we'll just lay it flat on the plane. So go to my rotation, get it close to the plane that we can. I'm going to pull it out toward me just a little bit like that. There we go. So it looks like it's going to be sitting right on that surface. And if we want it on the surface, 3D, move object to ground plane, and there it is. Okay, just dropped it down to the ground plane. So we're going to put objects on our desk. So I'm going to assess this camera view. It looks like it's tilted a little bit too much. Let me see if I can match that desktop space. Now I could, let me rotate it a little bit, the whole thing, so I can match, use my z-axis to match the z-axis of the depth. Use my x-axis to match the x-axis of the back end of the desk here. That seems to work. Okay, so that's probably the first thing I should have done. There we go. That's starting to look right. All right. Now from that point on, we can go to our individual 3D objects and rotate them accordingly to make them look like they should be part of the scene. All right, so once they're in there, I'm going to save this out. I'm going to make sure I save often. And I'm going to go place this in its appropriate folder. There we are. Go to my videos, and let's go over here to Santa Monica College. And I always like to keep everything organized as possible. Original images and desktop. I'm going to save it there. Okay, save it in a place that you know you're going to find it. I'm going to start to texture these bottles even further. So these are pre-textured. Now I made a little bit of a mistake, I believe, in that I may have moved the bottle without thinking about the lid. So I'm going to go find where the lid is. I'm going to target the lid, and let's bring that up. There it is. Okay. Now, if I need help with this, view, show, and we're going to show that 3D secondary view. Bring it back. Find out where things are. There's my lid. It's positioned almost right, but let's go over here to the side view. Let's go to my left view. Bring it in closer, and you can see it's slightly off. All right, now here's where the fun begins. I want to use this view to actually manipulate my scene. So if I get in closer, I think this view will be a lot handier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little symbol on the top right-hand corner, and it's going to switch these two views. Why do I need this? Because I can't really manipulate in this view just yet. That's an update that we beta testers have been screaming to Adobe about, is allow us to actually move things around in this view so we see it happening in our canvas area. So I'm going to hit this symbol, and it's going to switch them. So this view is going to become this view, and this view is going to become this view, which it just did. Okay? All right, so now it made an adjustment. Let's go pull this back here. And what we're looking at is the side view of this bottle with that background still there. So what I'm going to do is just take the bottle lid, move it on over, go to my rotation commands, maybe rotate it a little bit. And what I want is the actual lid. I want to be careful of that because things have a tendency to jump around on you inside of Photoshop. All right, go grab that. And I can even go to this view here, which is the Z-axis for rotation as well, and get it close to it. All right, so if you have a little mistake, that's how you correct it. So now I'm going to go back to my other view. Switch it. And the two are going to switch back again. And we're going to get our current view back. Okay. All right, so that lid isn't perfect, but I think you guys get the point. Go to my bottle itself. And let's go to the textured surface, go to the extrusion, and we're going to bring down the opacity of the extrusion. So bring it down to something like this. I can still see my vector shape that I used to create the extrusion from. So what are we going to do? target the inflation, because that's basically the inflation of this lathe shape. So Command or Control, one on the front, one on the back, go over to the opacity and bring it down completely so that they're gone and that it's not going to hinder my bottle. So my bottle isn't going to be completely transparent. Let's go target the bottle extrusion and maybe bring it up a little bit so it has a little bit of a plasticky look. And we'll give it a little more of a reflection too. So give it some shine on there. So increase the shine a little bit. Give it some reflection a little bit, okay, on the surface. And we can start to see the reflection of the light on this particular surface. It's starting to look like it's one of the actual plastic bottles. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so let's see what else we can apply to this. I'm not going to apply any bump at this time. And I'm not going to apply any refraction either. So I'm going to just keep that at 1.0. All right, so how about if we do a little bit of a render, see what it looks like. Go to my rectangular marquee and target the render button. Already you can see the transparency of the bottle is reflecting on the quality of the shadow that's being applied. So that shadow isn't totally a single solid color now. Now it becomes, you can see a little bit of the light coming through the center portion of the image. Look at that. That's pretty nice. It's doing a pretty good job. And I might even want to, increase opacity a little bit, but that's okay. We'll see what happens as we render it more, let it render just a little bit more, and it gives you a good idea. Now, when I'm actually working, I don't always let the whole thing render. Once I get a good idea as to what's going on, then I can stop the render. Okay, so I'm going to stop it now. And I think I told you I would not apply refraction to this. Let's apply a little refraction just so that you can see if it's actually going to affect the background. So I'm going to bring it up pretty high. And let's give it another render. Okay, so Photoshop 3D is taking up a lot of memory. And it's calculating as to how it's going to accomplish this. And let's see what it does. So I'm going to apply the render now. And there we go. And now it remembers what it rendered before, right? So what we have back here is a standard background in a 3D environment. So the goal here is to see if it actually has any effect on that background, which it shouldn't, because it's a standard bitmap image. If there's a 3D object behind it, then there may be some effect. Okay? All right, so I just wanted to just show you exactly what refraction would do against a standard background. All right, I'm going to hit Escape key, bring the refraction down to back to 1. So this gives you an idea as to what I want you to do for the homework assignment. So the lighting we've applied, we affected with a directional light source. Now I think I would like to affect it with something that's going to reflect in there. So I've got a bottle, so I may want to bring in this photographic image. Let's go ahead and pull it back to 0, back to 1. Use this photographic image from the background as a type of image to reflect into our bottle or our glass here. So we can do the same thing for the glass, for the magnifying glass. I haven't yet textured the handle. This is what you guys are going to do. Everything is going to be textured, and you're going to be graded on that. So think about how you want your objects to look, okay? All right, so I'm going to turn off this selection, okay, so that we can, I'm going to pull this back a little bit. And let's, I'm going to texture the glass next, and then we're going to add a reflective image to the bottle as well as to the glass so that you can see what we're getting overall. Okay, let's add a little simple modifications. I'm going to go to my magnifying glass here. Here are my 3D objects, and there's my magnifying glass. Let's bring it on down. I don't want the handle. What I want is the glass. Now, I don't want the extrusion. If I remember correctly, I believe what we had actually edited was the inflation. So if I target the front inflation and the back inflation, which was the inflated area on our actual shape, on the front and top of the shape, I'm going to go over here to the bottom. Let's find the opacity. See if we can bring that down. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to bring it down to somewhere like that, where we can still see through the glass. There's a little bit of a coloration on the glass, but nevertheless we can see there is some transparency there. I might even bring that up. Now I'm definitely going to for this you're definitely going to want to add some more stronger refraction to it, particularly if this is going to be viewing through to a 3D object, where the 3D object will distort a little bit inside. But since it's sitting on the ground plane and viewing only the background image, it's not going to have much of an effect. So I'm not going to worry about it. So what I would like to do is I want to give that some reflectivity. Go up here to reflection. Let's give it a nice strong reflection there. And I want to also go to my bottle and go to X extrusion and make sure the reflection is pretty high. So let's add in something to reflect. So I'm going to go to the very top to the environment tab. By default, you're getting this image-based light. All right, that's basically a gray background, in this case white dots. Now what I would want to do is replace that with my JPEG image. So replace the texture. There's my desktop JPEG. Double click it. Let's light this scene with the current environment or the photographic environment that we're trying to match. So give it a moment. It'll load it in and we'll see it. There it is. Now we're seeing it here, and we're seeing it reflected inside of our objects. I'm going to get in closer. You can see the reflections on here. And we can also see, at a right angle, we can see reflections on here. In fact, let's go to we're still in our environment. We're in rotation mode, and we can move this around. You can see, there it is in the magnifying glass right there. Let's see how it looks over here, over on the water bottle. So let's Command 0 to drop this down. There we go. And let's get out of the environment view. There we are. Now we can see it a little bit better. So at this point, let's give this a render to see how well this appears. It's starting to look like it's going to be part of the scene. Go to my rectangular marquee, just select this little area there, and let's go on and render this. So you probably notice these little white little lines are showing up here. Don't worry about them. If you're getting those on your computer, it's an OpenGL issue. It will not render. So by the time we're done, none of those white lines are going to be there. So you just saw one go away. And that image-based light, which are utilizing this photographic image, lights these 3D objects and makes them appear as if they're actually in that scene. And because we have reflection applied to the surfaces, it also reflects the image that being used within that image-based light, or IBL light source. Okay, so this is the basics for blending things in with your photographic scene. If you look right down here, we got an interesting shadows along with the glass, showing through to the left-hand side of our magnifying glass. And this is starting to look pretty good. So the longer you let it render, the better it's going to be. And make sure, surprise me with some real nice textures on your 3D objects. So once again, you're going to build 5 3D objects. You're going to texture them. You're going to merge them. And oops, that's all right. I can still record. You're gonna merge them, and then you're going to place them. Place your your photographic backdrop that you photograph with your cell phone camera or SLR camera, your choice. Just give me a nice looking image, and then use it as a background. Go to your camera view, place your ground plane, and play around with your field of view or your focal length to kind of match your objects to look as close as you can to the objects in your scene. Utilize that ground plane so that wherever it's sitting, it's going to cast a shadow to make it appear as actually falling on the very thing that is in the photograph, when in fact there is no 3D object. It's just a single photograph back there with the shadow falling onto its 3D plane. Okay, I think you guys have enough information to complete this assignment. Have a lot of fun and enjoy, and it's going to get better and more sophisticated.